Good evening and welcome to another edition of Resource PNG. Continuing on from the last episode, we discuss a range of issues surrounding occupational health and safety with the Department of Mineral Policy and Geohazards, the Chief Inspector of Mines, Integrated Safety Support and ABD-JTA. But first we talk to Shadrach Himata, the Secretary for the Department of Mineral Policy and Geohazards, about the Mining Safety Act that is currently under review for the first time since its decree. Mr. Himata also establishes the difference between MRA and the Department of Mineral Policy and Geohazards.
Mr. Himata, thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us on Resource PNG, Occupational Health and Safety Conference, which is the first conference, and you presented about the changes that are going to happen with the review that's happening with the Mine Safety Act. Could you give us an overview of what key reviews are happening with regards to the Mine Safety Act?
Yeah, as you would know, the Mine Safety Act has not been reviewed for some time. We are now going through the process of ensuring that we are able to capture the predominant issues with respect to the mining, industry. We are reviewing both the Act and both the regulations and the Act of the Mine Safety Act. So. We started the process in 2009, and we are hoping that by the end of this year, we should come up with a final draft.
You've highlighted in the conference and the emphasis on health, so it's not just the mine safety, it's health and safety. What was the thinking behind the shift?
It's basically because the workforce out there, you see, the mining industry employs about 3% of the formal workforce in Papua New Guinea, and a lot of these employees, they involve in very hazardous working environment in their daily activities. So without the human beings basically involved in active production every day, there is a loss of business to the mining companies. And you know that the mining companies contribute more than 60% of export revenue to this nation. And we need to look after the people who are actively involved in that production, that revenue source to the economy of this country.
Now you're heading the new Department of Mineral Policy and Geohazards. One of your focus is to make the regulatory and institutional framework in Papua New Guinea globally competitive. How are you going to achieve that by 2015?
Our main constraint in achieving this exercise successfully is really a financial constraint. We do have a budget to complete this exercise, but as you would be aware, every year we do make a submission to the government. We don't usually get what we ask for. But nonetheless, we are working with whatever funds we've been allocated by the government to try and basically achieve this exercise. So, but the main thing for us is that we need to make sure that there is a wider consultation. We want to achieve that through the public presentations that we are making, through the regional forums, and obviously through feedback from the Chamber of Mines and Petroleum to be able to assist us to move towards finalizing this particular legislation.
Now finally, just to our viewers who are not really familiar with the difference between the Mineral Resources Authority and the Department of Mineral Policy, could you highlight to them the key differences between the two?
Okay. As you know, we came out from the Department of Mining. The government, in its wisdom, there was an NEC decision in 2004, decided that the regulatory functions of the mining department be established in a new entity called the Mineral Resources Authority, while the remnant department will take care of the policy and legislations with respect to mining. But there's also an added responsibility that the Department of Mineral Policy was given, and that is to monitor all the geological hazards in the country. Now, the difference is that we basically, we are custodians of the mineral policies and legislations in this country, the MRA is the enforcer. MRA basically monitors or enforce these policies and legislations out there in the industry.
So it's like you're the lawmaker and they're the cop in the field.
Yes.
All right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just one of the things that's coming up is the review by Dr. Erikwa and the Constitutional Law Reform Committee on the mine waste disposal.
Yeah.
Are you part of that review process?
We are contributing to that process, but not so much, because this is another activity that we have already advanced since 2009. We are developing what we call a waste management policy for the country. We've already developed a framework. We have, as mandated by the government, that is our mandate to do that. And it is one of our priorities to ensure that we do consult everyone to have their input on that framework. And then we can take it to the policymakers to make a decision on enforcing this in the country. But we have developed a framework. But with respect to what the CLRC is doing, we only noted what they are doing, and we've given them our input.
Mr. Himata, thank you for joining us on Resource PNG.
Thank you very much.
We'll have the Chief Inspector of Mines when we come back. In this next segment, we speak to the Chief Inspector of Mines, Mr. Mohan Singh, about some of the groundbreaking achievements under his inspectorship, such as the inaugural Mine Safety Week conference that was recently held, as well as the launching of the first Chief Inspector of Mines report. In this interview, Mr. Singh highlights the importance of the regulator and the industry recognizing this importance.
Mr. Singh, welcome to Resource PNG.
Thank you.
You've obviously been initiating this safety conference for the past 3 years, and one of the highlights of this conference was the launching of the Chief Inspector's report, which is something that also did not happen for many decades in Papua New Guinea. Could you talk to us about some of the highlights of the conference with relation to some of the achievements that have seen under your inspectorship?
You see, you're very right that we never had a conference on occupational health and safety in PNG since Inspectorate was born, and we never had a report of the Chief Inspector of Mines coming out from the office of the Chief Inspector ever. Actually, this was revealed to me when I came to this country and started really heading the Mine Inspectorate branch of the Mineral Resources Authority. There were so many areas which were just blank, and I had to work out a strategy how we can gradually build on various things which are missing in the Mine Inspectorate. So apart from other various initiatives that we have taken, these two areas in terms of having a national level occupational health and safety conference and coming up with the report of the Chief Inspector, they were taken on board. To begin this exercise, in fact, we constituted a national level senior officers body, which we call it as National Apex Mining Safety Council. It is represented by all general managers from all mines and all project directors from new projects. So, and Chamber of Mines is also a member on that Apex Council.
So just back to the report itself, what do readers of the report expect to see? What are some of the key findings of your inspectorate report?
Okay. Chief Inspector's report, in fact, is something which other jurisdictions across the globe, the mine inspectorates, come up with an annual report of the Chief Inspector. Basically, this report captures the various activities that the inspectorate conducts under the Mining Safety Act and regulations in terms of inspections, inquiries, examinations that we conduct, permissions that we grant, prosecutions that we launch. So there are various regulatory activities that we carry out from time to time. Apart from that, we carry out also various safety promotional activities and initiatives in terms of Safety Week, ER competition. So this book, the first part of this book, it is in two parts. The part one captures basically the occupational health performance of the entire industry over the last 4-5 years.
So what's your assessment of that performance over the last 4? Has it been up to world-class standards, or do we still have a lot more work to do?
You see, if you look at the graphs that we have produced in this report, it is quite evident that the safety performance of the industry really started improving in good numbers. And we have seen that there is a drop in terms of accidents taking place or incidents taking place in the industry. And this is because of the fact that we have undertaken so many activities. So it is a bit of an involvement of the entire industry in this side, that people have now started becoming more vigilant and cautious about safety and health. This is one part.
When you first arrived in Papua New Guinea and joined as the Chief Mine Inspector, you found some shocking experience and a long list of depressing facts. So what are some of those shocking experiences and long list of depressing facts?
That's a very sensitive area. You see, regulator, has a recognition in any industry. To be a good regulator, the industry should acknowledge the existence and the importance of the regulator. Now, when I visited as a Chief Inspector of Mines, a couple of mines, I could see that a Chief Inspector is being received just like an ordinary visitor to a site. People are busy in their day-to-day work. You are just like any person on the street.
So today, if you go to a mine 4 years later, are you treated the same, or has there been improvement?
Things have changed drastically. We are in continuous communication with the general managers, as I said in my speech, that now the general managers are the registered mine managers, and they realize their responsibility under the Mining Safety Act, and they also acknowledge the position of the Chief Inspector and any inspector for that matter.
And that's interesting that the industry has recognized the importance of safety, is willing to work with your agency. But one of the things you also highlighted was that the Office of the Inspector of Mine essentially administers half of the regulatory or legislative role of the Mineral Resource Authority, which is to oversee the Mining Act and the Mine Safety Act. So the other half is your office, and you're understaffed. What sort of capacity building do you need?
You see, for any regulator, there are basically two elements for a regulator. Number one is that you need to have a well-qualified and well-trained manpower. Number two, you need to have a globally competitive legislation, which you want to have. I think the third thing importantly is that you have the resources, other resources to support you in terms of carrying out your regular activities. See, here, as I indicated, that out of the two acts, one is the Mining Safety Act, which is thrown on to the Mine Inspectorate, and which we have to administer. Now, as on date, this Safety Act applies to only basically operating mines. It doesn't still apply to exploration activities or geothermal energy that the Secretary was talking about, coal bed methane or quarries or things like that. So even within, we have 8-9 mines, reasonably big and medium scale mines operating in this country, and they throw a lot of challenges to us. These mines are comparable internationally, and we have around 22,000, 23,000 people as per our reports working in these mines directly. Indirectly there could be many more thousands working here. So now to really ensure that the regulator is there from time to time to oversee things, that yes, the regulatory requirements are being taken care of. You need people. There was a time here, I was informed that the inspectors were placed right at the mine permanently. I can't afford to have that. I have only 2-3 people with me, and we have to do a lot of administrative work, regulatory work, and then carry out inspections and queries. So it's
a pretty much big task.
We continue with this interview after the break. You're back with Resource PNG. For the first time, Papua New Guinea won't be an observer, but a participant at the Conference of Chief Inspector of Mines held in Perth this year. Another groundbreaking achievement for the Office of the Chief Inspector of Mines in PNG. We continue the interview with Mr. Mohan Singh and further discuss the vision of his office.
I suppose in recognition of the success of the Office of the Chief Inspector of Mines, you're actually going to be, for the first time, Papua New Guinea won't be an observer at the Chief Inspectors Conference. Papua New Guinea will actually be chairing the meeting in Perth. So could you just talk about the journey that Papua New Guinea has gone through?
Yes, it is a very satisfying journey for me as the Chief Inspector. When I joined, I was informed that Papua New Guinea is also an observer on the Conference of Chief Inspector of Mines. As per my understanding till date, I do not know if in any part of the world this sort of conference exists. It's a body represented by Chief Inspectors of Australia, New Zealand and Papua New Guinea. And for whatever reason, Papua New Guinea and New Zealand, they were just kept as an observer on this forum. It was basically being driven by Chief Inspectors from Australia only. So when I first visited as an observer, I really felt, as a professional, I said, I'm only a backbencher, just observing what they're doing. And because of the fact that the mining industry in PNG is internationally competitive, and we discuss their issues relating to the mining industry, somewhere we are lacking in terms of projecting the PNG mining industry to this forum. Next year, what I did, I prepared a presentation on what is my mining industry and what the mine inspectorate is doing. And this was something new for them. And then we said, then we raised the question, why we have been kept. Okay, there must have been historical reasons to keep us an observer. Why can't be a full member? I think they acknowledged the importance and the complexity and the depth of this industry and decided, okay. But they said there will be obligations on you if you want to be a full member. I said, we will take all those obligations. And under that obligation, we conducted the Chief Inspectors Conference here in Papua New Guinea and really demonstrated to them that we are capable of doing everything which you can do.
And I suppose that's a fantastic story about how a regulatory arm of the government can actually project to the world the great potential Papua New Guinea has. Now, looking into the future, where do you see the inspectorate heading, given obviously the reviews that are happening with the Mine Safety Act as well?
You see, my vision about the mine inspectorate is actually we, as far as the industry is concerned, I need not bother because the industry is already technically, administratively, system-wise, we are, as I earlier said, we are comparable with any industry in a developed world. As a regulator, probably we stand practically nowhere compared to the resources that they have, the competence that they have, and the sort of ability they have to regulate and manage. And that is one area which we are lacking, and that is where I keep trying and informing the government, informing the people who really matter, that unless we strengthen this area, we will continue to be backbenchers. You see, and this requires a lot of investment of resources, time, training into this. It will take, even if we start today, I think I will say maybe it might take us approximately a decade to come somewhere close to where the Australian mine inspectorates are. So my vision is that this inspectorate is comparable equally as the industry is comparable anywhere in the world in terms of resources, competence, and delivery, and whatever you name it.
Mr. Singh, thank you for joining us on Resource PNG.
No. Thank you, my pleasure.
We'll be back with more after the break. Thanks for staying with us on the show. We now join Dr. Adam Fletcher, the CEO of Integrated Safety Support, who has conducted research in the areas of stress and fatigue amongst workers and find out what are the most common causes for mine site workers.
Dr. Fletcher, thank you for joining us on Resource PNG. You're an expert in stress and fatigue amongst workers. You've done work with the US military research work and I suppose the Australian military as well. And you've done work in countries like South Africa, Laos, Indonesia. Just looking at the issue of stress and fatigue amongst mine workers, for instance, what are some causes of those stress and fatigue amongst workers?
Sure. I mean, the big and obvious one is really work hours. So if people are on rosters where they're working 12 hours per day or maybe 12 hours at night and they're working a lot of shifts in a row or even working overtime in addition to those shifts, the work hours that people have is a big challenge, because obviously trying to get people to get recovery sleep every 24 hours is quite difficult sometimes. That's a big factor.
One of the things also that you've highlighted in your presentation was, this is the presentation for the Mine Safety Conference, was that we human beings are programmed to be sleeping at night and not working at night.
Yeah.
How does that impact workers in terms of work stress and all that for mine workers who have night shifts?
Yeah, look, it's a huge factor really, and I used to work night shift in a hospital myself, and so I've also experienced it firsthand, not just researched it. But it's absolutely true that humans are programmed to be as functional as we can be during the day and to sleep at night. And it's not to say we can't operate safely at night, but it's not our natural way of being. And so really, as I explained in my presentation, there's a connection between stress and sleep and fatigue, because often if we're stressed or we're worried about something, we have more trouble sleeping. And if we don't get enough sleep every day, that can impact on fatigue. And that can mean that actually when new stress comes in, we don't cope as well as we might if we were well rested and recovered from fatigue. So there's this really clear dynamic. The good news is that it can also work the other way. So if people are really making a priority of sleep, they are less fatigued and they tend to cope better with stress as well. So it can be worked in the positive cycle as well as a negative cycle.
You are now doing work with Octedi Mining Limited. So far, what are you seeing with regards to workers' stress and fatigue levels at Octedi?
Yeah, well, the first piece of work that we did was really to help identify the higher risk roles, which was really a combination of the hours that people were working and also the potential consequences of errors while they're working. And so the first thing we found was that the groups we needed to focus on first were really the mining operations and also the transport operations, which included bus drivers, the people that drive all of the operators up and down the mountain before and after shifts, and also the line haul truck drivers who are driving on public roads and long periods of time. So initially we found that they're the groups we need to focus on, but we're also building, as part of the 3-year project, priorities for helping educate families and community, and also working with management so that the managers can show really clear leadership around this important issue of fatigue and micro-sleeps and sleep and stress.
Now, given the nature of the work that you're doing and how, whatever the results coming up, what sort of support are you receiving from Octedi management in terms of providing access to workers, and what sort of responses are you getting from workers? Are they concerned about providing information that might undermine their job, for instance?
It's a good question, and I didn't quite know what we would find when we first went there. we were very interested in spending as much time as possible with frontline operators, frontline team leaders or supervisors, and we haven't had any trouble getting access to people. And I do feel quite strongly that people have been quite honest with us, because a lot of people have said that they're quite relieved that we were there to talk with them about fatigue and sleep and things like that, because they felt it had been an issue for quite some time, but they'd never had the opportunity to speak about it before. And so people generally become quite happy to share information with us, because they know that it is an issue and they would like to see that it's managed better. So the first step is obviously to have a conversation and understand what people need, so that we can help build the information and training and other processes to really provide good information so that it can be better managed.
We'll be back with more from Dr. Adam Fletcher after this break. In this segment, we find out how the fly-in and fly-out roster impacts stress and fatigue levels of mine and petroleum site workers and the time taken to commute to and fro. In this interview with Dr. Adam Fletcher, he talks about the extractive industry taking on a leadership role instead of waiting for legislation to enforce mandatory standards to ensure better health and safety for the resource industry.
The impact of fly-in, fly-out and the commuting time on stress, fatigue levels. Could you just discuss that?
Definitely. Well, it seems particularly relevant in mining or even oil and gas operations that have quite remote sites, because we certainly know in Papua New Guinea that sometimes people can live up to perhaps 2 days away from where they work. So it really is important that we're clear when people are first starting a new block of shifts or a new panel of shifts. It's really clear that people have had the opportunity to have a good rest before they start, because what we don't want to do is have people coming back from, say, 2 weeks off. They're already perhaps not as fresh and sharp on the tasks and roles that they normally have. So it's really important that they're well rested and ready to start safely from the very first piece. So it's just something we need to be more aware of, I think, because if people are spending 2 days and perhaps 2 tiring days getting back to the operation before they start work, we really need to be conscious or clear about having a place where they can rest and recover before starting work. So they're not recovering from the travel once they start their shifts, especially if they start on night shifts, which is the more difficult shift usually.
And one of the suggestions that has come up was for some sort of legislative arrangements to make mandatory standards for occupational health and safety that would improve worker safety. But you've suggested that there are actually some things that industry can do without having to wait for the legislative processes. Could you just describe some of the things?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's a good idea, and even an idea that in the long term is a very good idea to potentially have legislation around minimum standards for potentially things like camp conditions and so on and so forth. But what I'm really encouraging companies and really the whole industry to think about is actually not waiting for there to be legislation, but really taking on some leadership now and deciding either as an industry or within an organisation or even within a single site, you know, what minimum standards do we agree to? And it could be around really simple things like the quality of beds, access to air conditioning for people that are working during the night and having to sleep during the day. You know, I'm really encouraging that sort of thinking and action now, because a little bit can go a long way, and then we don't have to wait for legislation, which may never come or may come in a long time down the track.
Now, interestingly, you've highlighted also the impact stress and fatigue can help on the body's function. Could you describe also some of those findings that have come up in the scientific world?
Yeah, and it's something we've been learning a lot about, particularly over the last 4 or 5 years, that people that work in shift work that is 24-hour per day shift work, where there's night shifts and day shifts, people who work in those shift-based environments do tend to sleep less per 24 hours than the average person who doesn't work shift work. And some of the medical and scientific things we're starting to learn about people that work in those sorts of environments for long periods of time is that the change to their sleep pattern and the amount of sleep that they're getting does actually start having effects on their metabolism and their ability to maintain a healthy weight, which then can have additional effects on things like type 2 diabetes risk or the risk of having sleep disorders or other medical conditions. So again, there's like this real spiral of things that impact on other things which impact on other things. And so if we can really encourage good behaviours to do with sleep, we do find that people manage stress better, and we find that they have less fatigue and can stay safer when they're driving and working as well.
Just finally, looking at the work that you've done with Octedi, I know it's too early to talk about results, but what sort of positive signs are you seeing out of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think initially, as I suggested a bit earlier, is there's been a relief to some degree already. I think there's a lot of people on the front line of the operations, operators in the mine, operators in other parts of the business, who felt a relief just to be able to talk about these issues, because they felt it had been an issue for some time, and it felt good to finally acknowledge it and bring it to the surface so that we could work together to really manage it better. So that's certainly one thing that's come out of it. But even though we're really early in the project, we've already started to develop some key messages and some training material and things like that. So it really won't take more than a couple of months or a few months before we start seeing some really practical and useful information be delivered to the frontline operations so that we better understand what fatigue is. People can help get some additional information to help themselves sleep better and manage fatigue and things like that. So even though we're not very far in, I'm confident that we'll start getting good information to people in the operation quite quickly, and people will be able to start benefiting from that quite quickly too.
Dr. Fletcher, thank you for joining us on Resource PNG.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Stay tuned for more when we return. Welcome back. We talked to ABJTA, whose main operation is in capacity building and healthcare and supporting AusAid health programs. In this next interview, we talk about how the organisation has branched into the resource sector through Octedi Mine Limited's North Fly Health Service Development Program.
Dr. John Menzies, thank you for joining us on Resource PNG. Now, you're involved with JTAI. Well, now it's ABT JTA, but initially when you commenced the operations in Papua New Guinea, you were just JTA. And your company actually began with capacity building in healthcare in Papua New Guinea. Could you just give us a brief overview of that?
Yes, we've been involved with supporting AusAid health programs since around 2000. And of course, AusAid programs over the years have been very strongly focused on capacity building. Our special sphere has been health, so we've been intimately involved with many supporting activities since about 2000.
Now, you've gone into the resources sector, particularly with Octedi Mining Limited, with the North Fly Health Service Development Program.
Yes.
How did that come about?
That came about because Octedi has a health service that it runs in the local community, and that's Tabooble Hospital. And they needed a health service provider to provide the manager and also the background support, including medical, technical support. And we became involved, I think it was 2004, 2005 with them, until more recently, where they've evolved into their new structure, which has involved Divine Word University. So we've been involved in helping Tabooble Hospital raise its standards. It was the first private hospital, in fact the very first of any type of hospital in PNG to get full 5-star accreditation under the PNG hospital system.
One of the things you've highlighted at the recent conference on occupational health and safety in the mining sector is that companies that do not have the capacity to deliver healthcare could provide could obtain support from an external partner. How does that work, given your experience with Octedi?
Yes, obviously the big mining companies like Octedi, Lahire and Oil Search, they all have their own in-house health services. And the health services are there primarily to support the workers, but they also can support community members in emergency situations. At Octedi, the Taboobal Hospital has not only supported the mine workforce, but it's also supported the local community. So all the clinics there, for instance, individuals, citizens from anywhere in the surrounding area can come in and receive care as they would if they were in a hospital anywhere else in PNG. But at Taboobal, the mine has provided all the logistical support, so the hospital's well staffed, obviously, but also has all the appropriate drugs and medical equipment consumables to ensure that it offers a full service. Given
the fact that workers on operational sites have to go out into their communities on breaks, and the Not-Fly Health Service model is such that if OTML workers were to go to, say, Kiunga, for instance, if they were from the local area, they'd still receive a relatively decent health service. Is that the thinking you were trying to express when you talked about how companies need to think holistically about occupational health and safety, not just on site but off site for their workers?
Sure. Octedi has historically had a very strong interest in supporting the local community in Western Province, particularly those around the Kiunga, Bigay and Taboobal areas. And yes, the North Fly program, which is I think in its 5th year now, started off with the goal of revitalising the community-based health services. That's the aid posts and the rural health centres, to ensure that their staff were educated, they got the logistics to ensure that they got the drugs and consumables they needed to provide the service, and the support if they required it. The North Fly program also provides patrols out into the jungle areas to ensure that the really remote communities get access to basic healthcare, including immunisations for children. But coming back to your earlier question about how can the private sector help mining companies, as I said, the larger ones tend to have their own in-house service. The smaller mining companies, particularly those often in the exploration phase, don't have all the necessary infrastructure as a larger company like Oil Search or Lahire. So they can benefit by having an external provider provide their health services for them. And today I was making the point in the conference that the ability for a worker to remain healthy depends on a triple action. It really involves firstly ensuring that they're as healthy as possible when they start work, and then during their working life that there's an active interest in what happens in the workplace, not just the issues that are, if you like, the workplace concerns of a mining industry, but the general health issues that the person will face, particularly if they fly in and fly out. And finally, the other issues which are very important for this mobile population that we now have in Papua New Guinea is how can we support their health when they go back into their local home or community? Because when a person leaves a protected environment almost of a mining site, they go back to areas where perhaps there isn't control of malaria or mosquitoes, there isn't access to the tuberculosis services, etc. So understanding those issues and helping provide them in the workforce ensures that the worker can maintain the best possible health status.
One other interesting thing that came up in the conference that you've highlighted is that there's a lot of data being collected by company health clinics and particularly in screening of employees, that could inform public policy. Could you just elaborate on that?
Yes, absolutely. We were involved with one of the early stages of the LNG project involving citizens from the 4 villages around the new LNG plant. That's at Pora Bada, Lele, Papa and Bora. And when all these individuals came in to be screened for jobs, yes, we did collect over 2,000 people, which represented about 35% of the population. So that's a fairly sizable sample. But we collected a lot of very basic data, for instance, just height and weight, but also from the questioning about habits on smoking, chewing betel nut, etc. All of that is very useful epidemiological information that could help the National Health Department, for example, in understanding disease profiles and behavioural profiles in a local community. If the Department of Health doesn't have a lot of money to spend on epidemiological studies, most definitely, as you said, the information that's collected by mining companies would be immensely valuable in understanding the health profile of a local community.
So public health is more than just cash. It's also about information that can be provided and that can inform decisions being made.
Absolutely. Information is king, as they say in other areas. Health information, particularly about a normal community, is not something that governments usually have money to spend on. The governments are usually more focused on specific diseases that might be flavour of the month. To get quality data about the general health status of a population is a rare activity, but when you do get the data, it's extremely valuable for a health department to understand health issues and help with planning for health services.
Dr. John Menzies, thank you for joining us on Resource PNG.
It's been a pleasure.
That ends this edition of Resource PNG. If you have any comments or queries, do email us on this address, resourcepng@mtv.com.pg. Or to find out more, check MTV online, that's www.mtv.com.pg, and go to our Resource PNG page. Or you can check our page on Facebook. Until the same time next week, bye for now.